Hay Festival.
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 Bienvenidos al podcast Hay Festival 2025, un espacio para imaginar otro mundo.
Bienvenidos al podcast 2025, la edición especial del podcast del Hay Festival en español, en la que celebramos el 20º aniversario de nuestro festival en Cartagena de Indias. Yo soy Iñaki Lasetura.
Y yo, Gaby García. Para celebrar este momento único para nosotros, les pedimos a nuestros seguidores que nos enviaran las preguntas que consideraban eran claves para entender el mundo que vivimos. Después de un largo ejercicio, nuestro equipo ha seleccionado las 20 preguntas más significativas y para responderlas reunimos a algunas de las mentes más brillantes y más expertas en cada tema, que participaron en la más reciente edición del Festival de Cartagena en enero de 2025. Empecemos.
Estamos con Suraj Yengde, que es el autor del bestseller Caste Matters. Las castas importan. La revista GQ lo nombró uno de los 25 jóvenes indios más influyentes y actualmente completa su segundo doctorado en la Universidad de Oxford. Es autor de más de 180 publicaciones académicas y su próximo libro, Caste, a Global Story, Castas, una historia global, se lanzará a nivel mundial dentro de muy poco, en abril de 2025.
Okay. Suraj, welcome. Thank you for your time. And now the first question is, are we witnessing the end of the single Western narrative?
First of all, lo siento, no puedo hablar español. I will speak next time I come in Spanish. So I'm happy that the Hay Festival has invited me. The question was about what was it again? I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The question is, are we witnessing the end of the single Western narrative?
That's correct. Beautiful put. Yes, the Western narrative is in decline. And that's why the amazing Hay Festival that's happening here in Colombia, not necessarily in the Western space, all of us have come to the non-Western hemisphere, makes a lot of important narrative. And there has never been a single narrative. There have been multiple narratives. But usually the ruling class of all the societies created a narrative that suited them. But now with multiple identities, people, different colors, different background, different caste, different race, religion, are now occupying important spaces to express. So that has really given us a musical, more flavorful, more colorful narrative. And I think that's a representative of the world, which is not just siloed in a single narrative of whichever hemisphere we talk about.
Are there alternative models to democracy?
Ignacio, that's nice, very nice question. The democracies that we have inherited, the political democracy, is very much after the colonial experience in major part of the world. So our understanding of democracy is rooted with how we look at political representation, how the rights and justice are articulated through liberties. But if you look at these values and place them on any societies that are not really used to having this form of democracy. Democracy has multiple forms. It doesn't always mean that the rights and justice and equality that we talk about in a way will be applicable to people who also talk about those, but in a different way. The methodology is different. So if we emphasize that democracy as a solution to certain societies, it may not work because people work in a very cohesive way. If you look at the tribal indigenous communities, that's a democratic society, but that's also not what we see a representative democracy looks like. That there is what we have a equality of everyone through very much practice of communist principles, socialist kind of distribution of resources. So today's democracy, the way we understand, is capitalist in nature. It's very much rooted in how the ruling caste of each country uses democracy to advance their own interest. So you as a regular citizen feel like you're giving a vote and hoping to change. But the actual change that we expect from, let's say in Switzerland, there is a canton-based democracy. You vote and canton takes its own decision. Here, it's several bureaucracies that are in place, which gets difficult to translate into messaging. So I think when we talk about democracy, we should really articulate what kind of democracy we are looking for, what we are aiming for. And if we just advocate democracy through the principles of Western modernity or even Eastern modernity and think, okay, this is how democracy should look, I think we need to articulate. And democracy in each local context has its own history, and I think we should be sensitive to that.
Very, very interesting things, because yes, it's a complicated situation about understand different options that have the government to give us an order. About that, the next question is, how can we combat structural racism?
Structural racism. I mean, you see, we have to understand what is racism. People talk about it being a color problem, it being your ethnic problem, it being your background, it being your heritage. There's so many complicated things. We have reduced racism to understanding white, black, or mulatto, mestizaje, raizels, and so forth. I mean, if that's what we are talking about, then we are talking about a very different question. But if we would really want to talk about the inequality that is existing in the societies, then racism as a term is not adequate. It doesn't convey the everyday structural inequalities that operate. People say structural racism, cultural racism. I mean, the whole idea of race itself is fiction. We can't really build on that. It doesn't give us a concrete material evidence to talk about inequalities. So if you want to talk about inequalities that transcends all of this, then we really need to bring into picture what casta mean. Casta is very much Iberian concept. Ibero-America here, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, the Spanish and Portuguese were practicing. So we really need to go back to those archives and not rely on what America does, what Great Britain does, what Europe does. There are unique histories for your own communities here. And that's what I'm interested to see. I was learning there are nearly 64 ethnic communities in Colombia, 4 or 5 racial groups. That's a complicated situation. We can't just talk about it as being a race issue. It is an issue of structure. It is an issue of how culture is. It is an issue of how economy and political representation is distributed. Until and unless we pay attention to this, and imagine, each individual story of a community is different. You can be from Cartagena, you may live inside the wall city, or you may live outside the wall city. You belong to same background for color wise, but there is mix. If you ask what are your grandfathers, they will say they were Afro descendants, one is mestizaje, they were Spaniards. And there are mixing happening. So what do we make of race? That's why I think we need to have a very thin analysis which will bring us together to, in your society, every society there is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is maintained permanently. If there are some things we can change that, then yes, we can talk about how to break the structure of this inequality.
One of the topics that has been discussed, like in the Western society, and maybe also in the Eastern ones, you will be the ones telling us if it's been there. It's been like sometimes we are seeking, or people seeking for security, or at least governments or other media is telling us security. So the question of our readers was, would we give up our civil rights in order to have greater security?
It need brilliant question. It need not be different things. Civil rights should be constitutive of securing each and person's physical, mental, as well as dignity. And that is the security we can offer in much more confidence. Until and unless we are able to do this civil rights and security issues, I understand the situation where people are like, there are civil rights and we need to protect the people from different kinds of tyrannies. But I don't think the issue of security should be constitutive, intrinsic to how we guarantee civic liberties to people, without which I don't think so civil rights will have any future. Because if people are not secure, you are a family man, or you may not have a family, you are a person who lives in a community, and so forth. One of the things you look for is security. People pay taxes to the government so that they can have security. The government is there to provide police to a security. But what happens when the same instrument becomes oppressive? it punishes you. That's when civil rights come in place. But if you have a society where citizens' rights are at the forefront, other matters of insecurities and justice can follow with the individual's investment in that society and in the country.
Yes, it's very, very interesting that, and I like and talk about this topic because the next is something similar about it. You know that today we have a very bad problem with immigrations. So the question is, how should governments manage immigrations?
Very good question, and you have to understand, immigration is bound to happen. It has been happening for thousands of years. But we look at immigration through different lenses depending on our social and economic situation in our country. If your country is prospering and if it has resources, obviously more prosperity requires more labor. If you don't have enough labor, you need people to work for that kind of jobs. So you want people to work for you. But if you are a country that is itself suffering, doesn't have jobs, living in a very insecure condition, that's when you see yourself, I don't have a job, what is the new immigrant gonna come and do? Now these are the paradoxes that the state and the society needs to understand. But also there is something beyond this, which is a human care that we can give to other human who is vulnerable and in need. The economic question then immediately becomes a question of culture. Then we say, oh, that immigrants coming from Venezuela, the immigrants coming from Peru or any Caribbean country, oh, they are lazy, they are coming, we create all kinds of negative stereotypes about them. But if you are able to articulate that as a positive contribution, migration of rich people, when it happens, nobody has a problem. We welcome them. But do you think they are less lazy? They are less corrupt? They are less oppressors? No. The money that they have made is what also constitutes representation of that. So unless and until we put that into attention, we will not reach end goal. So we have to compare that. So there is a desirable and there is undesirable. If I have to choose between desirable and undesirable, my requirement will be the person who is most vulnerable, who is going to sacrifice his or her family in the need of finding a good future. I will find that person, as opposed to a person who has many resources, could go anywhere in the country. And we need to create a positive narrative around migrants and migration as well.
Suraj, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being part of this special edition of the podcast Imaginemos Otro Mundo. Gracias, Suraj Yengde, por estar con nosotros en esta especial edición del podcast Hay Festival en español Imaginemos Otro Mundo.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias por acompañarnos. Una producción de Ojo por Ojo Multimedia. Hay Festival 2025. Un espacio para que imaginemos otro mundo.